Hi everyone, and welcome to Horror Spectator. If you're new here, consider subscribing. We dive deep into the darkest, most chilling real-life horror stories out there. And if you're a returning viewer, I'm so glad to have you back, friend. In this video, we're heading back into the Appalachian Mountains to cover 3 absolutely terrifying stories of people who went camping, thinking they were in for a peaceful getaway, only to find out that the dense woods hide more than just wildlife. Out here, the trees can cover everything, from psychopaths to things we simply can't explain. We kick things off with one of the most disturbing and disgusting videos I've ever come across. Then, we move on to a story that isn't just terrifying. It's, in my opinion, deeply unsettling, because it reminds us that sometimes the biggest threats come from the people closest to us. And finally, we dive into a creature sighting that defies explanation, something that roams these mountains at night and kills anything that crosses its path. As always, thank you so much for being here and for keeping this channel alive. Your support means more than you could ever imagine. Now, dim the lights, get comfortable, and let's head back into the mountains. And remember, viewer discretion is advised. This story happened 5 years ago, and when I tell you it's absolutely bizarre, I'm not being dramatic. I was camping solo in the Smoky Mountains, a few miles off a backwoods trail not far from Cades Cove. The Smokies are filled with remote cabins people can rent, and even though I usually stayed away from those more popular areas, I'd set up close enough to a known cabin spot near a lake I'd seen before on past hikes. It was quiet, peaceful, dense woods surrounding me on all sides. It was mid-afternoon, the kind of warm stillness that makes everything in the woods seem frozen in time, when I saw them. A couple, a man and a woman, stepping out from the trees like they'd been dropped there. What hit me first was how incredibly attractive they were. Not just regular good looks, but the kind of beauty that felt manufactured. Skin like porcelain, teeth perfect, eyes too clear, hair like they'd walked off a film set. The kind of pretty that almost made you let your guard down instantly. Pretty privilege is real, and I felt it. For a moment, it was weirdly comforting to see people like them that deep in the forest. The second thing I noticed was that even though it was summer and unbelievably hot, they were both completely covered in clothing, not a bit of skin showing except for their faces and hands. They asked if I knew where a cabin was, said they had rented one but had been walking for hours and couldn't find it, showed me some photos on a phone, and I knew the place. I'd seen that exact cabin before. It sat near the water, half hidden by brush and vines. The kind of secluded spot that only really experienced hikers ever find. I told them where it was, told them to walk in the direction of the water. If you stood still long enough out here, especially after dusk when everything goes quiet, you could hear the sound of the lake pushing up against the edge of the rocks. I watched them walk off, and something about the way they moved, like they knew they were being watched, stuck in my head. But I let it go. They literally looked like 2 models, completely out of place and teleported straight from the city into a remote area in the middle of nowhere. That's the best way I can explain it to you. I eventually forgot about them after a while and went back to my own stuff. It was the second to last night I planned to spend out there, and I wanted to make the most of it. Maybe even finish the book I'd brought with me. As it started getting dark, I thought about lighting a small fire to make dinner, but that's when the man showed up. He was alone, said they still hadn't found the cabin, and now his girlfriend was missing. He looked shaken, breathing hard like he'd been running. I felt for him. I'd probably panic too if I lost someone out here. But it didn't sit right. I couldn't shake the thought that if they were so inexperienced, like they told me at the start, why choose such an isolated spot in the Smokies? And if they had pictures of the cabin, and we were literally so close to it, how were they this lost? I figured there's dumb people out there for everything. And that's exactly why disasters happen so often in those mountains. People with zero experience thinking they can handle it. I decided I was going to help. I wasn't about to let another tragedy happen out here, especially if there was something I could do to stop it. I told him I'd help. And that's when I saw an expression flash across his face. I can't even tell you exactly what it was. It was quick, almost unpredictable. But whatever it was, it made my body react like it was standing in front of a threat. Without thinking, letting instinct take over, I told him I just needed to grab a quick drink of water from my tent first. So I slipped into my tent, grabbed my sidearm, and tucked it into my waistband. Something in me had started buzzing, like a quiet alarm ringing under the surface. We started walking. At first, he seemed anxious, nervous even. But the farther we got, the calmer he became. I asked where he'd last seen her, and every time, he dodged the question, just repeating that it was somewhere in this direction. We were heading toward the cabin. Once again, how was it even possible that they hadn't found it? Then I asked again, and what he said made me stop in my tracks. He told me they got lost near the cabin. Near it. Not looking for it. Near it. Which didn't make sense. Just a half hour earlier, he told me they hadn't found it. I turned to look at him, and he already had a knife in his hand. Just like that. No change in expression. Just standing there, holding it like it belonged there. My hand instinctively went to my gun. I pulled it out and raised it, demanded to know what the hell was going on. He didn't speak. He just smiled. Not friendly and not nervous. Just a cold, calm grin. And in that moment, the woods felt smaller, the darkness thicker. Then I heard footsteps behind me. A female voice said something I couldn't make out, but her tone dripped with mockery. I turned to look, and I have to say, I had never in my life seen anything so bizarre. Not even in horror movies. She was completely naked, her body covered in deep scratches and thick scars. Her skin looked like it had been dragged through thorns. She saw the terror on my face and, like she was on a runway, gave me a little bow and slowly spun in place. Her back was even worse than the front, completely covered in blood and deep, raw cuts, like she had been whipping herself. Her mouth curled into a grin as she walked toward him. When she got to his side, she began unbuttoning his shirt. Slowly, almost ceremonially. Underneath, he looked just like her. Not fresh wounds, but older ones. Dried blood, healed cuts. They had been cutting each other out there in the middle of the forest. I could feel the guns slipping in my hands, slick with sweat. And I don't even think it was fear I was feeling anymore. It was absolute terror. I knew I wouldn't make it out of there alive unless I ran. I bolted without thinking, just pure instinct, tearing through the forest with branches slapping at my arms and my breath coming in ragged gasps. I kept expecting to hear footsteps chasing me, but when I finally turned to look, they weren't running. I was expecting to see them close, running after me. But no, they were far off, barely visible, just walking calmly like they knew I'd get tired eventually, like they'd done this before. I thought about going back to camp and grabbing my gear, but figured that'd be the first place they'd go. So I turned the other way and ran straight for the trail that led to the road. Eventually, after what felt like hours of stumbling through the dark, I saw the glow of gas station lights. The whole run-up to that point was a mix of wondering if I was losing my mind and hallucinating everything, while at the same time, every little sound made me think it was them, that they were going to jump out of nowhere and attack me, covered in blood. I burst in, panicked and breathless. When the guy saw me come in, looking like a maniac, he grabbed a gun and aimed it right at me. I tried to explain everything as fast as I could, stumbling over my words and describing scenes that sounded surreal out loud. I expected him to think I was crazy and tell me to get out. But instead, he lowered the gun and got me some help. Then he told me he believed me. About 3 years ago, a couple had shown up there with the exact same story. For all that time, he thought they were either messing with him or high on something. But now I was confirming that none of it was a joke, that it really had happened. The next day, a team of rangers was sent out, but they never found a damn thing. To this day, I have no idea what the hell happened. I know it was bizarre and terrifying. I have no clue if it was some kind of cult or if they were just sick people. Whatever it was, I hope I never find out. Everything I'm about to tell you happened around a year ago, in the summer of 2024. But if I'm being honest, it's something that had been building for years. Since I was a kid, actually. To give you some context, I live in a pretty remote part of Appalachia. So I know most of the people around here, especially those my age. We all went to school together, which means we've known each other since we were little kids. My best friend's name is Ethan, and my girlfriend is Grace. The three of us have known each other since we were kids, and we've always been close. Sure, there are other people who hang out with us, so we're not like a tight-knit trio or anything. But I guess I'm the one that connects everyone. That's probably what makes me and Grace and Ethan do more stuff just the three of us sometimes. Another important thing. Grace and I have been together since we were 15. We're 23 now, still together. And here's a weird little detail I didn't even think about back then. But by the time you hear the whole story, you'll get why it actually matters. You know how little kids sometimes play house or pretend they're dating? Well, Ethan and Grace were kind of pretend boyfriend and girlfriend when they were really little. By the time we hit 4th grade, they'd already grown out of that. They realized it was just a silly game. When I started dating Grace years later, I didn't even remember any of that. It was so long ago. Just a dumb kid thing. But when Ethan found out, he didn't exactly take it well. Actually, it wasn't that he reacted badly. He didn't react at all. He just kind of went quiet, like he didn't even hear what I'd said. Over the years, I started noticing little things. He became stiff, kind of awkward whenever Grace was around. He'd come up with excuses to leave early, or not hang out at all if she was there. One time I mentioned it to Grace and asked if she thought he was acting weird. She told me she didn't really know him all that well anymore. Said they were close when they were kids, but kind of drifted apart. That's when I first started wondering if he was holding on to some weird resentment. I didn't want to ruin our friendship, so I asked him directly one day. He completely lost it. angrier than I'd ever seen him. A few days later, maybe a week, after I'd tried reaching out a few times with no answer, he showed up at my place to apologize. Said he'd just had a bad day and that it had nothing to do with Grace. He just didn't vibe with her and liked it better when it was just the two of us. Then he suggested we take a trip, just the two of us, go camping in the Appalachians like we used to. Something we hadn't done in a while. I really wanted to patch things up between us, so I was in right away. The plan was to hike for a bit and camp out for a night or two in the woods. He told me he needed to prep a few things, but that in a week or two we'd be good to go. That whole week, I didn't hear a single word from him, which was weird because we used to talk all the time. I figured he was just busy. His dad worked at the gas station in town, so when I stopped for gas, I casually asked him if everything was okay with Ethan. He kind of paused and said yeah, but admitted Ethan had been acting weird lately. Said he'd been locked up in his room almost all the time, only coming out now and then to grab something, then going right back in. I told him Ethan and I had a camping trip planned, and he looked surprised. Like, genuinely surprised. Said he didn't know anything about it. Anyway, the day finally came and we left early that morning. Right off the bat, Ethan felt off. I remember one of the first things he asked me was whether I'd told anyone where we were going. I was about to say Grace, but something in me held back. Didn't want to stir anything. I told him I'd mentioned it vaguely to my parents. He gave me this weird look, then asked if I'd mind changing the route a little. Said there was a ridge further north he wanted to check out, and that we might have to stay out 3 nights instead of 2. I didn't have a job lined up yet, so I told him sure. A couple hours into the hike, I asked him if we were really okay, him and me. He said we were, and I brought up the fact that we hadn't really talked in almost 2 weeks. He said it wasn't intentional, just that he'd been busy helping his dad at the gas station. Started telling this whole story about how his dad was getting older and needed more help. It sounded fake. We'd known each other forever. Why lie about something so small? As we kept walking, I picked up on more little things. Small lies, kind of passive-aggressive responses, and mostly just how damn quiet he was. But it was on the second night that things really started getting strange. I'd brought a bit of booze with me. Not a lot, just enough to take the edge off. I was drinking slow, but Ethan was really going at it. That's when he started talking. Not straight out, but kind of hinting at stuff. Like veiled jabs about me and Grace. There was this growing bitterness in his tone, and I told him maybe he'd had enough. That's when he snapped, got super aggressive. Way more than I'd ever seen. It shook me. I didn't want to escalate anything, so I suggested we call it a night. Said we had a long hike ahead tomorrow. He said he wanted to stay by the fire a bit longer, and told me to go ahead and crash. Usually on these trips, we'd bring one tent and share. But this time, we had 2. So I got up and headed to mine. I tried to sleep, but I couldn't shake the heavy feeling. Something was off. The air felt thick, like it was holding some kind of grief. I tossed and turned for like an hour before finally deciding to step outside. He'd passed out on the ground next to the fire, bottle empty beside him. That's when I noticed the little notebook in his hand. I got closer, curious, and saw it was kind of like a journal. The handwriting was all messy and almost angry looking. My name was scribbled out in several places. That got my attention. My name and Grace's were all over the pages. I knew I shouldn't read it, but at that point, curiosity had its claws in me. I tried to gently slide the notebook out of his hand, but he shifted and muttered something, almost woke up. So I backed off and figured I'd check his tent instead. What I found in there shook me. 2 more notebooks. Not really journals in the traditional sense. He skipped around a lot. Some entries days apart, others months, even years. But some of the writing dated back 15 years. Normally, I might have found that interesting, a look inside someone's head. But as I started reading, I got this cold, sick feeling. At first, it was all about Grace, how they were meant to be together. It was obsessive and delusional. He was describing things that never even happened. Then my name started showing up, right around the time Grace and I started dating. Pure hatred. Just raw, disturbing stuff. The deeper I read, the more horrified I became. This was someone I'd grown up with, my best friend since childhood. And yet, I didn't know him at all. I knew something was seriously wrong, and I needed to figure out exactly what. I didn't even bother being subtle. Yanked the notebook from his hand. If he woke up, I was ready to confront him. But he didn't. Just mumbled something and rolled over, still way too drunk. If I thought I was freaked out before, the last few pages broke me. That trip to the Appalachians, it was a setup. Only one of us was supposed to make it back. I couldn't believe what I was reading. He'd spent the last 2 weeks figuring out how to kill me without getting caught. He planned to burn the journals, disappear into a new life with Grace. He'd probably be hungover the next morning, but not out of commission. I didn't wait to find out what he had in mind for me. I grabbed the essentials, stuffed them in my pack, and got the hell out of there. I made one big mistake, though. I left the journals behind. I was shaken. Panicked. Not thinking straight. Just wanted out. So I left them. It was stupid, I know. But seriously, how would you react if you found out that someone you grew up with, someone you saw as a brother, had been planning to kill you and had secretly hated you for years? Truth is, you never really know how you're gonna hold up until you're right in the middle of the shit. It took me 2 full days to get home, even moving fast, always looking over my shoulder. I figured I had a head start, but based on those journals, he was motivated. When I got back, I went straight to the cops and told them everything. But by then, it was too late. The journals were gone, burned, with no evidence left behind. Grace and I ended up moving out of state at the end of that year. But before we left, he showed up at my door. Said that no matter where we went, he'd find us. And since then, he's turned the whole town against us. Convinced everyone we're the ones with the problem. The story I'm about to tell y'all isn't very long, and it's not super detailed either. But believe me when I say it was the most terrifying experience of my life. And it really happened. It wasn't some shared hallucination. It wasn't just kids imagining stuff. Over the years, I've heard all kinds of excuses from adults trying to discredit what I saw. But I know it was real, and if I ever doubted it before, I sure as hell don't anymore. That's why I'm here telling this now. My family had lived in West Virginia all their lives. But when I was still a baby, my parents moved us to Ohio. Still, we went back every summer, or at least I always did, even if my parents couldn't make it. One summer when I was younger, I spent 2 weeks at a local summer school, and that's how I met a few kids from around there, and we ended up becoming friends. It's a more isolated area, fewer people, fewer kids, so folks tend to be closer knit. I'm still really close with 2 of those friends to this day, though I kinda drifted apart from the others over time. But anyway, back to that night. The night everything happened. It was 11 years ago. I was 13. In that area, it was pretty common for people to go hiking or even camp out in the Appalachians. And since we were 13, we figured we were old enough to do it too. Of course, we were just kids, and no one was about to let us go out there alone. I was super disappointed. But my grandpa, seeing how upset I was and wanting to give us some kind of experience, said we could set up camp in the backyard of their place, which backed right up into the woods. So it was almost the real thing. So, even though it wasn't what we originally planned, we didn't even hesitate. We jumped at the chance. It was July 31st, 2014, and we got everything ready for a night out in my grandparents' backyard. I remember my grandma wasn't thrilled about the idea at all, and she kept trying to talk us out of it. But that only made us more determined. The only thing that settled her down a bit was my grandpa promising her he'd stay outside with us and keep an eye on everything. My grandpa started us off with a small, controlled campfire, and then let us do our thing while he settled into his own tent right next to ours. None of us wanted to sleep. We were all set on staying up all night telling scary stories, every now and then unzipping the tent just to stare out into the pitch-black woods. The only rule he made us promise was that no matter what happened, we weren't allowed to step outside the tent. If we heard anything, someone calling our names, whistling, anything at all, we weren't supposed to answer. Not even if we thought it was him. We thought that was a little weird. But Clarice, one of my friends, agreed right away. Later on, she told us her parents had told her some stories before. Like I said, we were all hyped to stay up all night, but we were kids, so by around 1 a.m., we were exhausted and ready to pass out. I know I must have fallen asleep for a good while, maybe even close to an hour. I woke up to Clarice shaking me, whispering that there was something outside the tent. We could hear this strange noise, hard to describe. But what really got to me was this horrible smell in the air, like something metallic and rotting at the same time. It was sickening. We woke the others up and just sat there listening for a few minutes. We wanted to peek out, but my grandpa had made us promise not to. At least Clarice and I were dead set on keeping that promise. But it was too late. Julia was already unzipping the tent flap, and that's when we all saw him. There, halfway hidden among the trees, was a man. At least, it looked like a man, but the body was all wrong. His head was freakishly large, and his body was so thin, it barely looked human. Like he hadn't eaten in months. It was like seeing a full-grown man who was completely malnourished and just off in every way. We all screamed at the same time, and within seconds, my grandpa was at the tent, dragging us out and yelling at us to run for the house. My grandma must have already been awake because by the time we hit the porch, the door was wide open and she was pulling us inside like her life depended on it. We all just stood there in the doorway, frozen, watching my grandpa running with that thing chasing after him. The way it ran, it wasn't right. It didn't move like a person. It was fast, jerky, almost like it wasn't fully in control of its own body. I've never seen anything like it. Not before and not since. That night, we all stayed in the living room, some of us crying while my grandma tried to calm us down with hot drinks. But even she looked terrified, like she'd seen something she couldn't explain either. The next day, we found out the neighbor's dog had been found dead on their land. 2 houses down, someone's goats had been killed too. All of them. No heads. My parents freaked out. They told my grandparents they were irresponsible and then told me not to worry, that it was probably just some wild animal. But I know that wasn't true. There's no animal out there with that kind of body. It wasn't a bear. I'm absolutely sure of that. Over the years, people kept telling me it was nothing. They even took me to a psychologist who said it was some kind of shared delusion. But I know what I saw. Or at least, I don't know what it was. But I know I saw it. I know it was real. And I know we barely got away.